In this video I'd like to take a look at the adjustment brush. So what's that, I hear you cry? Well, it's a local adjustment tool which lives here in the toolbar above the basic panel. Now we can access it by clicking on this icon here or pressing K on the keyboard. Now we can see here a lot of sliders to play with, and if we drop down to the bottom we can see there's some brush settings as well. And we've got three. We've got a brush A, a brush B and an erase brush. Now this allows us to set two brush sizes for painting in an adjustment, like presets, and an eraser to erase the adjustment if we go wrong. So let's start with brush A. Now here I've got it set for 10 pixels. At the moment I'm going to set the feather down to 0 and leave the flow and the density, which we'll talk about in a moment, up to 100. So okay, we can see the brush here, so let's paint in an adjustment. There we go. I bet you're thinking, now that is really impressive, that. Okay, so what's happening? Well, what I've actually done, because none of these sliders have been moved, they're all set to 0, I've actually painted in no adjustment. So I've actually defined the area where I want the adjustment to be, but I just haven't said yet what I want the adjustment to actually be. So to do that, I need to move one of the sliders. So just for an example, let's take this exposure slider right down to -4. Okay, let's have a look at brush B. Here if I click on B, you can see we've got a brush set for 5 pixels. Again, 0 feather. We'll leave the flow at 100 and the density at 100, and we'll click and we'll drag along another. So this time we've just got a smaller brush, that's all. So if you need to get into any little corners, you might be able to set one brush to a small brush, and then for filling in the big areas, a bigger brush for doing all the filling in. And it just gives you basically access to 2 brushes. Okay, let's go back to brush A. Now let's look at feather. Okay, let's set the feather right up to 100% now. And you'll see on the brush that we've now got 2 circles. Now the area in between is the transition between the hard edge, which is the inner circle, and the totally blurry edge, which is the outer circle. And the area in between is the transition between these. Now if we paint with this, we can see we get the same size brush as we had with the top one, but the edge is all blurred because we've got like a softness on it, and that is the feather. Now if that was too much, what we can do is we'll say drop the feather down to say 50%, and then if we draw another line, you'll see this adjustment is again, it's the same size, but the edge is just slightly not as soft as this edge, because we've now come from 100% softness, which is really soft, down to 50%, which is not as hard. Okay, so that's feather. Let's have a look now at flow and density. Now to have a look at these, let's just get rid of all that. I'm just going to click the reset button just to get rid of all that stuff we've done before. Now I'm going to choose brush A, and I'm going to set the feather up to 100%. Flow and density, I'm going to leave it 100%, and I'm going to paint an adjustment. And again, there's nothing there. So what I'm going to do is drop this exposure down to say -2, just over -2. So you can see now I've got a soft edge adjustment. Now just for the heck of it, let's add a colour to this, and we can do this by going down to the little colour swatch at the bottom here. And if I click on that, and then we'll add a weird colour so you'll be able to see it, we'll make that go a little bit purple. So I've just now added to this adjustment, to that -2 exposure, I've added a colour. And you can see that here, that it's now come out to be like a little purpley colour. Now let's set the flow down to say 50%. And if we paint another line, you'll see that it's much lighter because we're working at now a 50% flow. I suppose this is a bit like how much paint you've got on your brush. But now if we paint it again, we can make it a little bit darker, and if we paint it again a little bit darker, and if we keep painting, it'll get darker and darker and darker until we actually get to the same colour we had before, which will be up to 100% adjustment. So flow controls how quickly I can build up an effect. So how is density different? Well, density basically caps the amount of adjustment you can make. So let's set the flow back to 100% and we'll set the density down to say 50%. And now if I draw an adjustment again, you'll see we're working at about 50%. But now if I keep drawing over it, it won't get any darker. That's the maximum that it will let me make the adjustment. So density actually, it puts a maximum on the amount of adjustment you can make. Now this is a bit like a volume control on a stereo. If I set it for 50% volume, no matter what record I play, the volume will never go above 50%. So the flow sets how much adjustment you can make on each stroke, and the density, the maximum amount of adjustment you can make. Now the third brush we have is the erase brush, and that does what it says on the tin. If you make a mistake, you can click on the eraser brush and you can erase any of the adjustments that you've made. Now each adjustment comes with its own pin. You can see that here. We've got the pin with a little dot in it. Now if I hover over this pin, it actually shows you in like that red overlay that comes up where my adjustment is. Now if I decide I want to change that adjustment, I can do. Let's say I'll change that to make it a little bit lighter. You can see that it lightens the whole adjustment. Now if I wanted to keep that adjustment where it was, but I needed another adjustment, then what I've got to remember to do is go and make a new adjustment. And this will stop editing this adjustment and make a new one. So if I click on new, let's say I need a positive exposure for this one, and then I'll draw like that. You can see I've got a nice light adjustment going on now, but it's separate from this adjustment above. And now this is the adjustment that's live because it's got a pin in it, and this is the adjustment that's been switched off. But I can switch between them by going and hovering over this pin and clicking on it, and now this is the adjustment that's live and this is the adjustment that's not live. And you can only edit one adjustment at once. So if I want to come back to this one and click on it and make an adjustment, I can do. If I want to adjust the top one, I go up to that pin, click on it and make an adjustment. Right, well that just about wraps up our look at how to use the adjustment brush tool to make localized adjustments in the develop module of Lightroom. I hope you found that useful. I'll see you in the next video.